Assembly of God, we're so glad you're here. Again, this is a little bit different than what is normal because of Aaron not being here. I almost called him Pastor Aaron again. I'm telling you, I keep doing that. All right, so today is our annual business meeting, and I kind of thought it appropriate during our annual business meeting to kind of give you the vision that God has given for the church. And as great of a vision as I could ever come up with, or you could ever come up with, if it's not the vision that God has for the church, then it's pretty much worthless. You agree? So I want to tell you what I believe God's vision is for the church. This isn't, my vision is just what I believe He's saying to us. And I don't think it's also just for Benton AG. I think it's actually a vision for the church as a whole, the global church. And actually, as you listen to the different missionaries that we talk to, or that we have speak, or the missionaries that are coming next week, you're going to realize that there's this pattern of things that God is obviously doing in the church, and it's not just confined to these four walls, right? The idea is that we're not going to be a church that has hidden our light under a bushel, even if that bushel has a steeple on top of it. You get the idea? See, a lot of times we as believers say, hey, we can't hide our light under a bushel, but then we kind of come into church and it's just us five and no one else. I don't want to reach out to anybody else. It's just for us. That's never the intent. In fact, it's really hard to even have somebody that, as an example, for you to go out and invite somebody to come to church is fantastic. That's a great thing to do. But guess what? If you're expecting me to lead somebody you know personally to Christ, why? You're the one with a personal relationship. You're the one that knows them. Lead them. Right? The idea is that church is where you come and get equipped to go out into the world and reach the world for Jesus. And if that's not happening, then there's an issue. So I want to kind of talk through that. And I realized as I was talking to God about that this week, I said, hey, what do you want me to say as the vision that you have for the church? God kind of responded in his normal way to me and just said, I've been telling you this for months. And I went, okay, what do you mean? He said, go back to the beginning. Go back to the beginning. The very first time you spoke here. Go back there. So I want you guys to go with me. Go back all the way in the Wayback Machine. I know, so far long ago, right? All the way back to December. December 19th, in fact. That was the very first time we were here and we spoke. And in that moment, we spoke about family. Remember, we had come, my wife and I had come the week before. We had nothing, we knew nothing about this place. We didn't know where it was. We didn't know what was around. We didn't know any of you yet. We just showed up one Sunday. And we said that as soon as we walked into the church, we felt like we belonged, that we were a family, that we were supposed to be here. This was before any of you even knew we were pastors looking for a church. We felt like we belonged here from that point. So God told me in this moment, He said, I've been telling you since that point what the vision of this church is supposed to be like, that we are to be a family. We are a family. If that ever becomes something that where we start fragmenting off or getting into cliques and all this other stuff, then we're not doing His vision. His vision is that we are together. We need to be united. Think about the world today. The entirety of the world. It doesn't matter what political party you're affiliated with. It doesn't matter what you believe. It doesn't matter anything. Everyone is trying to separate us. Everyone. They're all trying to split us up. We're trying to get, well, all the conservatives are on this side. No, the liberals are on this side. All the Christians are on this side. And everybody else is on this. The whole point of society seems to be today to split us up. So what better way to counteract that than to say we are a family? Do we have problems in families? Yeah, of course. But we're not going to walk out on each other because of our disagreements. Because we're a family and we still love each other and we're still going to work it out. That's the point. So that he told me about that one. Then he said, okay, now think about when you spoke in January. And I said, okay, well, we spoke January 2nd, January 16th, January 30th. We didn't do the one on the 9th because I think there was an ice storm, if I remember correctly, and we had to cancel church, if I remember correctly. So on those three, I said, well, what were we talking about then? He said the entirety of that message was about doing new things. All three services. All 3 of those dates were all about doing something new. And I said, oh, yeah, that's right. I remember that. I remember speaking to you guys about Habakkuk 1. It's actually the verse that's on the sign out front here. It says, look to the nations. We're doing such a new thing that even if I told you, you wouldn't believe it. God said, if I tell you what's coming, you still wouldn't believe it. It doesn't matter if I tell you or not. Then we talked about Isaiah 43. Believe it or not, on your bulletins, I did not make these bulletins. My wife did. See the verse on the front? It's been that verse for the last 2 weeks, the only times we've done the bulletins. Isaiah 43, right? Behold, I'm doing a new thing. Again, this keeps coming up over and over again. That the idea here isn't that we're just a family, but we're a family that's pursuing God, and we know God is doing something new. We said, actually, if you remember back then, I said, if what we're doing looks like something that's been done before, I don't think we're doing it right. Because he said, I'm doing a new thing. Not something that sort of looks like something else we've done before. I'm doing something new. So it's critical for us to understand that as a vision, that we're a family, and that we're following God as we're doing something new. So let's skip ahead again, about 2 weeks ago. Actually, it was the last time that Aaron wasn't here. And we did a service all about worship. And instead of doing the normal traditional service where you have a couple songs, then you have the announcements, then you have a couple more songs, then you have a message, we mixed it all up. You remember? We came up to the front, we started with the announcements right away, got them off, and then we did a message and then a worship song. And then a little bit more of the message, and then a worship song. A little bit more, right? And the idea was we're learning about worship. We need to make sure that we're understanding what worship is, and that we're going to put into practice immediately what we were just learning. And I said over and over again in that message that we are to be a people that worship God and do what he says. That's the point. Worship God, do what he says. That's it. So God said, you're a family. We're doing a new thing. And you are to worship me and just do what I say. I said, all right, I get that. And then he reminded me about what my wife spoke about last week. She talked about the difference between just believing that there is a God, believing in God, and actually having a relationship with God and knowing him. That there was a drastic difference between those two. And he reminded me of something that I just briefly said in a message about that there's actually only 2 commandments. And that's where we're going to start today. So in the Old Testament, I think I mentioned this before, but does anybody remember how many laws are in the Old Testament? 613. 613 laws, and that's not even counting the 10 commandments, so you put that on top. So 613 laws and 10 commandments that you have to obey to be at the level of God's expectation for you. And then if you look at James 2:10, James 2:10 says that if you break even one of them, you're guilty of all of them. How many of us, I mean, let's be honest, we're Christians, there's an issue, we're against, abortion, we believe that it's murder of a child, we don't agree with homosexuality, we don't agree with the transgender movement, we believe that how God created you is how you're made, there's all these things that we see as Christians as wrong. Right? I'm not being funny here, like serious, right? Okay, but how many of you have ever lied before? Come on, every hand should be up. I try really hard not to lie, and my hand's up because I know I have. So, ready? We all lied, right? James 2:10 says if you lied, you're guilty of homosexuality. You're guilty of murder. You're guilty of all those things. It says if you broke one law, you're guilty of all of them. We're against them, obviously, but guess what? It's just as important to be against lying and gossip and things like that. It's just as important. See, we have a problem with marrying a homosexual couple, which is totally understood. But we should have just as much of a problem marrying a couple that's living together before they're married. It's just as guilty. But society has kind of made that normal. And because of that, we say, oh, well, that one's okay, even though we know it's a sin, but it's okay. But this one we won't do. We've drawn a line between what we'll accept and what we won't accept, but God says, I didn't make that line. Amen. So we have this thing of these 613 laws and 10 commandments that we have to obey, otherwise we're guilty of all of them, even if we break one time. If you lied one time and you never broke another thing ever in all of history, you're still guilty of all of it. It's just how it is. That's his expectation. God's expectation is perfection. Right? And we definitely didn't make that. So it's really important to remember that. In the New Testament, actually we're going to go here. You know what? Let's actually open our Bibles. Matthew 22. I'll give you a second to look. Again, I really appreciate if you have your Bibles and you turn to them, even if they're in your phone, because I can kind of say the Bible says whatever I want it to say, and if you're not looking at your Bible, you don't know that I'm being honest or not. I am, but you get what I mean. I would rather you see it and say, oh yeah, look, it really does say that. Okay? So if you have a Bible, please have it out. Matthew 22, starting in verse 34. It says, hearing that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, the Pharisees got together. One of them, an expert in the law, tested him, meaning tested Jesus, with this question. Teacher, what is the greatest commandment in the law? Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. Now, stop there. That's verse 38. That's all he asked for. He said, what is the greatest commandment? Right? God said, love the Lord your God, all your heart, all your soul, all your mind. And then he continued and said, and the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and prophets hang on these two commandments. You get that? All of the 613 laws, the 10 commandments, all those Old Testament things, they all hang on two commands. Love God and love people. Think of every law that you can think of. It will either break loving God or loving people. Think about it. That wasn't rhetorical. Actually, think of something. Put it in those two categories. Is it disobeying God or is it being disrespectful to people? I promise you, it'll be one of them. The whole law, everything, boils down to two things. And God said, as far as a vision, you need to love me and you need to love people. Now, Pastor Joy last week talked about loving God. So I don't want to kind of rehash what she said. It's online. You can find it. You can listen to her message. It's great. Okay? I want to start on the love people part, though. Because there's a big difference, even throughout the Gospels, of what it means to love people. Because Jesus came on the scene and kind of broke the mold a little bit. Because when the Old Testament was there, they were told to love their neighbors and hate their enemies. That's the rule in the Old Testament. Did you know that? That was the rule. If you don't believe me, it's in Matthew 5. Matthew 5, Jesus actually says that. You've heard it said to love your neighbor and hate your enemies, but I tell you to love your enemies. Right? That's what it says. The Old Testament law was love your neighbor, hate your enemies. But Jesus said, that's not good enough. You need to love your neighbors, that's good, but also love your enemies. And people went, that's weird. That's strange. How do you love your enemy? I don't know how that's possible. And Jesus said, look, what good is it for you to love your neighbor and hate your enemy? Everybody can do that. People that don't have a relationship with God can do that. The world today is full of people just like that. They love the people in their group, and they hate that other group. They love that they're conservative. They love that they have this group of conservatives, and they hate all the liberals, or vice versa. They love that they're, a Christian, but they hate all those people that keep trying to mess with Christian faith. If we're loving our friends and hating our enemies, we're not doing what he said. He said, love your enemies. Very straightforward. Then we go to this verse. The verse we were just doing in Matthew 22. And it says, love your neighbor. That wasn't new. That was in the Old Testament one, right? Love your neighbor, hate your enemies. So to love your neighbor wasn't new. But it says, love your neighbor as you love yourself. And a lot of Christians get all haughty at this one. They're like, I'm not supposed to love myself. That's pride. No, it's not. See, a lot of people use verses. Romans 12:3. If you want to go there, you can. I'm just going to read it for you. It says, don't think of yourself more highly than you ought. And a lot of people read that verse and go, see, I'm not allowed to think of myself highly. That is not what it says. It does not say to not think of yourself highly. It says, don't think of yourself more highly than you ought. In other words, there is a degree to which you should be thinking of yourself highly. And it's in that loving yourself, in that part, that we're supposed to take that and say, as highly as I think of myself in this area, I'm going to turn around and I'm going to love my neighbor. Because if you don't love yourself at all, you can't love your neighbor. It's impossible to love somebody else if you don't have love for yourself. How many times are we sitting in a thing where we're putting down all these other people, and why are we putting down all these other people? Why? Because we don't have love for ourselves. We're holding them to the standard that we already know we failed. We can't do that. That is not what he's saying. In Romans, it says, don't think of yourself as more highly than you ought to. In other words, there is a degree to which you are supposed to love yourself. And in that degree, in that part, we're supposed to turn that around and love our neighbor that way. It cannot be that we hate ourselves. If we hate ourselves, we cannot follow this command. It is impossible. We keep talking about this as though it's humility. It's not. It's more prideful than what most of you are thinking of as pride. Because what are you thinking about when you say, oh, I'm just a worthless worm? Oh, woe is me. Did you hear that I just said I and me in both of those sentences? What are you actually thinking about? Yourself. It has nothing to do with you. That's the point. The idea of this self-debasement, that you're putting yourself down, is so prideful. It's saying that I'm this. Look at me. Look at how awful I am. I lift all you guys. That's how you say that you're lifting other people. That's not how it works. The idea is that you're at a place in your life where you are loving this part of your life. And it's because of what God did through you, mind you. It's not just that you did something great. You're at this part in your life where God is doing something amazing in you. And how do you help other people? You grab them and you pull them up to where you are. You teach them. You mentor them. You do all those things that we talked about in the other messages. You help them understand what that is for you. Finally, so we heard love your neighbor, hate your enemies. We heard love your neighbor and love your enemies. That's how I changed it. And then we heard love your neighbor as you love yourself. But then you get to John 13. I actually want to go there because I kind of think it's funny. So go to John 13. I'll even go in there too, so you have a little bit of time as I flip. John 13:34. In this spot, Jesus has already said, love your neighbor as yourself. And then in John 13:34, he says, hey guys, you're not getting it yet. A new command I give you. You see it, right? John 13:34. A new command I give you. Love one another as I have loved you. So you must love one another. Let me say it again. Love your neighbor, hate your enemies, turned into love your neighbor, love your enemies. Then it went to Love your neighbor as you love yourselves. And Jesus went, hey guys, you're still not getting it. You know what? Let me help you. Love each other as I love you. That is a standard well above what I can even express. But that is the standard that he set. He said, look, I'm trying to help you out. I'm trying to get you from Old Testament into New Covenant. I'm trying to see how this shifts for you. See how you were supposed to hate your enemies back then? No, you're supposed to love your enemies now. Oh, you're still not getting that? Okay, well, how about you love your neighbor as you love yourself? Oh, you're still not getting that? Okay, let me try it again. Love your neighbors, love everybody as I love you. Good luck. Because no matter what you do, you can always get better. There is never a time when you say, I have loved as Jesus loved. There's always a next step. There's always the next thing you can do. There's always a little bit more love you can pour out. And it's how you're supposed to love to everyone. Not just the people in this room. Not just the people in Benton. Not just the people you agree with. You're supposed to love everyone that way. So, vision part, ready? We're supposed to be a family. We're supposed to be looking for what God is doing new. We're supposed to love God, and we're supposed to love people, and we're supposed to worship Him and do what He says. Good so far? One more. Last one. The final part of this is for us as a family to reach Benton, Columbia County, Pennsylvania, the United States, and the entirety of the world with the gospel of Jesus. You get that? That's the evangelistic part. That's where we're supposed to go out and actually do something. We cannot sit in these pews and have one meal a week and say, oh, that was great, I'm going to starve myself till next Sunday. Amen. We need to get out of these pews and actually do something. See, so many times people go to their prayer closets and say, God, why don't you just intervene in this situation? I believe the brother back there said about Ukraine. Why don't you intervene in this situation? Well, that's great for us because we can't actually go there. But guess what? There are people there. There are churches all over Ukraine. There's a missionary family that we support that was there. And they had to come back because they have kids and they were trying to protect their family. But there's many people that are still going there. There's people from the U.S. going there to help. Voluntarily. We can support that way. We can pray. We can give support that way. We can do all those things. But at some level, we have to say, what can I do? Not what can we do? What can I do? Because otherwise, we sit in a chair and say, oh, somebody else will get that. And guess what? No one ever does. Did you know there's actually a statistic about this, that the more people that witness a crime, the less likely it is that it will be reported? Did you know that's a real statistic? If 1, 2, or 3 people witness a crime, the chances are it's going to be reported because somebody's looking around and says, oh, there's nobody else, I have to. But when you get 20, 30 people on a subway in New York, watch somebody get pushed in front of a train, and nobody reports it, why does that happen? Oh, well, somebody else will get it. I don't have to be the one. It happens over and over and over again. We're Christians, guys. We're the ones that are supposed to step up. We're the ones that are set apart. It has to be that way. We can't trust that other people are going to do what God called us to do. That's how we got into most of these messes. When the government is doing things that we as the church are supposed to be doing, no wonder it's messed up. How can we trust them to do the job that we're called to do? But in this evangelistic message to reach the nations, I want to draw your attention to the Great Commission. The Great Commission is listed 5 times in the Bible at least. I picked these 5 because there's one in each of the Gospels and one in Acts. Okay? You do not have to go there. I highly recommend you write them down, though, and look them up later. The first one most people know is Matthew 28:19. Matthew 28:19 emphasizes going to all the nations. To go and make disciples of all nations. Right? Then we got Mark 16:15. Mark 16:15 emphasizes going and preaching to every creature. That is a crazy verse. And I'll tell you why. There was a missionary in Africa. And he was walking through the dense jungle. He'd gotten lost, and he doesn't know how to get to where he's supposed to go. And he's really confused, and he doesn't know what he's doing. And he's just kind of wandering along, and he sees a bunch of monkeys up in the tree. And he hears God, like almost audibly, tell him, preach to the monkeys. He said, no, you're nuts. I'm not, did I have bad pizza last night? What's going on? There's no way I'm preaching to monkeys. So he keeps walking on a little bit further, and he's getting closer to the monkeys, and he hears God louder, preach to the monkeys. God, I don't know why you're telling me to preach to monkeys. I can't understand, they can't understand me, I don't understand them. This is kind of crazy. No, I'm not going to do that. And he gets right to where they are, and it's like God's yelling at him now, preach to the monkeys. Fine, okay. And he gives remember, he's like, he doesn't even want to do this. He's giving a half-hearted message to some monkeys about Jesus. He says, okay, fine, I did my job, and he starts walking away, and he hears a voice saying, can you tell me more about that? Underneath where the monkeys were two Africans that he didn't know were there. And when he preached to the monkeys that he could see, he actually witnessed to people that he couldn't. You see, it says to preach the gospel to every creature. There's a reason for that. All of creation lifts up the name of Jesus. It says that if we don't worship, even the rocks will cry out. There's actually a church we went to, I loved it. They had this big rock up here, like on top of the table, and they painted on it. It said, don't make me sing. I mean, that's an indictment on the church, is it not? If you're going to make this rock cry out because you're refusing to, that's crazy. Luke 24:47 is the next one. It again emphasizes all nations beginning in Jerusalem. It actually emphasizes Jerusalem. That's important here. Because Jerusalem was where it started. It's like your home. Start there. Start in your home. In our case, that would be here. Benton or Columbia County. Start here. John 20:21 is the same thing. It emphasizes that same way. It actually says that as Jesus was sent, so are we sent. You hear that? Do you know there's actually a verse in 1 John that says, as he is, so are we in this world? You know that verse, right? Think about that. As he is, not as he's going to be, not as he was, as he is. Where is he now? Seated at the right hand of God. All authority. As he is, so are we in this world. Not someday when we're raptured and we're in heaven. As he is, so are we in this world. Are we? That's what it says. Are we living that way? The last one that I want to really draw our attention to, though, is Acts 1. I actually want us to go to that one. Acts 1. We're just going a couple more pages up, if you stay where you were. Acts 1, verse 8. Jesus has been crucified, and they're all hiding. And he comes to them and literally scares them because he walks through a wall. The door's locked because they're thinking, Jesus just died, I'm next. They're going to come after me next. So they're hiding in a room, lock the door, don't let anybody else in, and Jesus comes and walks through a wall. And then he says, peace. Yeah, right. If somebody walked through this wall right now, you think you'd all be peaceful? No, we'd be running out that door as fast as we could. But he said peace. And then he goes in and starts talking about what he's going to do. And verse 8 is where I want to draw our attention. It says, but you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you, and you will be my witnesses. Ready? In Jerusalem. And we already talked about Jerusalem. That's where they were from. That's like Benton or Columbia County. In Judea. That's like our version of Pennsylvania. For us. For Samaria. That's like our version of the U.S. And to the uttermost parts of the world. That would be all the other nations. Is there a spot anywhere in that where there is somewhere that we're not supposed to go? That was a real question. No. It's saying to reach the entire globe, starting in Jerusalem, then going to the next place, then to the next place. It's great we have missionaries. I love that we have missionaries because we're reaching those other places too. But we also have to be reaching here. They get to go do that because we should have this place covered. That's the point. So what is the vision of the church? I'm going to read it just so I make sure I get it all exactly the way I wrote it. We are to be a family who loves God and loves people. A family that worships him and does what he says. A family that will expand throughout Benton, Columbia County, Pennsylvania, the United States, and to every other nation on the planet. That's the vision. That's the vision of this church, and I believe that's the vision of every church. Maybe their Jerusalem is different. Maybe it's not Benton. Maybe it's Harrisburg. Maybe it's D.C. Maybe it's Portland, Oregon. Maybe it's somewhere else. Maybe it's Kiev. Maybe your nation or your Jerusalem may be different. Maybe it's, remember I'm new here, so I don't know everybody. Maybe Bloomsburg, might be Millville, might be somewhere else, right? Might be Berwick. Maybe that's your Jerusalem. But the idea is that we start there and expand out. That's what we're supposed to do. So why would we not have a chance here to start? Why not start now? Literally, right now. As far as the vision, that's it. But I want to be the first one that takes that step. I want to show you, as I told you the one day, that if I take that step forward, it positions me, my momentum starts to move to take the next step. I want to be the one that helps you to get that step started. And I'm going to do it this way. There are people here in this room, and if you don't know, there are 2 cameras on me as well. And I'm sure there are people there. Actually, I know there are people there. Did you know that we have been reaching over 100 people every week through social media? Just in our videos. There are people out there that are hungry for what God has for them.